Hello, everyone. I'm Christian Roberts, Director of Education at the Dallas Opera. I'm here with my fabulous colleague and co-host,
Quote Decia Johnson, Education and Company Culture Manager for the Dallas Opera.
and we have returned with another episode of Taking the Stage with Christian.
And Quo. One of the things we've started doing for several episodes now, and that we will continue to do for every episode, is a land and people acknowledgement. So we want to take this time right now, right here in this space, in this virtual space, and wherever you're watching, to take the time to acknowledge that we here in Dallas are on stolen land. The land is stolen. This is originally the land of the Caddo, of the Wichita, and of the Comanche sovereign nations. Sovereign nations that faced inhumane conditions, that faced genocide, that faced policies that forced removal of their nations, of themselves from their land by any means necessary. So we want to acknowledge that this land was already inhabited, that nations were already here, people were here living, having stories, creating memories, cultivating the land before forceful removal. So we want to be mindful of what that means as we face the attempted forceful removal of these individuals, of these nations, from our stories and from our narratives as well. Dallas is not alone in this. The entire nation is on stolen land. And so we want to be mindful of what that means and the ways in which we have to come together to connect. In addition to acknowledging that we are on stolen land, I would also like to acknowledge that we are in Dallas, which is built by stolen labor. Individuals, families, entire nations were stolen from their home and brought here and forced into free labor, enslaved. And so we, as the people who have the ability to enjoy within certain areas, to enjoy certain privileges in this land and in this nation that was built with stolen labor on stolen land, we have to acknowledge that while we did not create these conditions, we do have the opportunity, we have the honor, we have the responsibility to come together, to connect, to help heal the harm, to help reduce harm, and then to help correct the stories so that we make sure going forward we acknowledge the humanity in one another and that we do what is necessary to reduce the harm. So I thank you for taking the time to join me in this land and people acknowledgement.
And we also thank you for tuning in week after week. Your support is fantastic. The support of the Dallas Opera, providing this platform. Shout out to our friend again, David Lomeli,
Hey, David.
who, who so graciously approached us with this show about, maybe what now, 5, 6 months ago. It's been an incredible run so far. So Quo, let's get into it. Let's introduce our guests.
Yes, I am extremely honored. I am excited. I know we say all our guests are special, and I'm just gonna stop saying because they are. Just assume that they're all amazing. With us today, we have Elder Peggy Larney and Brian Larney, individuals that I met through a cohort with Dallas Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation, but individuals who have definitely influenced my work, who have changed the way that I approached my work in racial healing and equity and acknowledging what is necessary for connection. Individuals that I am honored to be able to call friends, to call brother, sister, and to be able to get this work done with. So Elder Peggy and Brian, if you'd like, please go ahead and let everyone know who you are.
I'm Peggy Larney. I'm a full-blood American Indian, and I'm a citizen of the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma. I'm a retired Dallas Independent School District employee. I was in charge of the American Indian Education Program for about 20 years and have retired from there, but still continuing my work in the city of Dallas and throughout the state of Texas and sometimes at the national level in American Indian heritage and culture. So I stay very, very busy even in my retirement age. I'm glad to be here and thank y'all for the land acknowledgement. Y'all cookie, thank you for that. It made me very happy to hear that.
So I say Halito Stengo, which is hello in Choctaw and Seminole. And I'm chair for American Indian Heritage Day and also chair for Indian Citizens Against Racial Exploitation. Also, I want to say for our section, I want to say rest in power for Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I think movements don't happen unless individuals like her take a stand. So in that part, just want to make sure we acknowledge our leaders against other leaders. So thank you.
All right. So yeah, that was a tough one. It seems that my Facebook feed it lit up, and I was like, whoa! It was, it's one of those times where the uncertainty of the pandemic and the civil unrest and now losing somebody who is such an iconic figure in the U.S. So. So yeah, it's been very strange, and I've seen many different reactions to it. So Brian, I am grateful that you said something about that. I want to get into what is the two of you. You're like this mother-son dynamic duo. That's what I think of you as ever since I've met you, because what strikes me the most about the both of you is the fact that Elder Peggy, you've been doing this work, and I'm a sucker for people who are educators. I always have been, if you if you can't tell. And the work that you did with DISD, and bringing about and talking about something that is ignored by history books. Talking about an entire groups of sovereign nations being ignored by the history books, or being portrayed in ways that are flat out there. Well, they are stereotypical, and being portrayed in everything from cinema to comic books, stories. And of course, history textbooks in schools. And so, can we just talk a little bit about what you did in DISD?
Even before DISD, I came to Dallas under the relocation program of the HEW, I think at that time. That was because there's a research done indicated that Indians living on reservations, homeland, or bases were way below poverty level. And so there's a discussion, well, how do we help the Indians? And this is from the Kennedy brothers, from my understanding. And a program from there developed to have employment and training for American Indians, meeting those that meets the criteria. So basically families, probably younger families that may have 2 or 3 kids, maybe under 40, I think 40 was the cutoff line. So those families that came, the 11 cities were selected, metropolitan cities throughout the United States, and Dallas is one of those early sites. And so families would be placed to Dallas. Just think, remember, these are people not coming from little towns or from cities, but from a rural country or from a reservation. The cultural shock that they had to deal with, the racism they had to deal with, at a maybe greater viewpoint than what they've ever had to experience. But a lot of them couldn't handle it. They went back home. And some of them stayed and were into 3rd and 4th generation now. On the other hand, young adults were coming in. And like me, after I graduated from my high school in McAlester, Oklahoma, which was a public school, and my brother and I were the only 2 Indians that graduated through the whole system. And I went on, instead of going to college, I was told at that time, because my father was a handyman type of person, had no income coming in, mom was staying at home being a housewife. This Indian agent came by looking for somebody else, but saw me, and she asked me what grade I was. I thought I was getting ready to graduate, and she asked me what I want to do. Yeah, I had no idea, but of course, I'm like everybody else. I heard some people say, well, I want to go to Durant, Southeastern College. And so that's what I said, even though counselors had never talked to me about it. Mm-hmm. And that was the time that counselors, especially to the Indian kids, didn't even look at it as being possibility of going to higher education. Mm-hmm. And so nobody ever talked to me. So I had no idea what that really meant, since I'm choosing Southeastern. But the lady said, well, we've got a college that's for Indian students that go out of college and out of high school, that can get a certificate or degree from a program that they're interested in. And so that would fit mine and the family's economics. In the meantime, that was early spring. My mother dies in that July, and I had already been accepted to go to Haskell Institute in Lawrence, Kansas. All I've ever been was on a road trip to Oklahoma City to visit my aunt. That was it. And then maybe around McAllister, we didn't have a car, so Daddy would always really drive in the car, and we would go to some of the church, big church meetings for our Indian people and singing. So that my limit was very small as far as traveling was involved. But I had no idea where Haskell Institute was, what it was. Didn't know anybody. But Dad bought a ticket for me and put me on the bus, and I went to Haskell. As it turns out, it was a 2 years institution. And I chose business. And so after I finished there, I got a certificate in business management. And then then I had a choice. And that's when the Bureau of Relocation program was just coming into effect. And so I had a choice where I wanted to go. But it was just my dad and then myself, basically. I had a brother, but he was getting ready to finish high school and going to college. So and my dad's health wasn't that well. So I went ahead and chose Dallas. I had no idea where Dallas was, never been to Dallas. But I got on a bus and came to Dallas. There's an office for relocation program that helped us. Supposed to find employment. Well, the lady sits there and flips through the Dallas New Morning Paper and Dallas Times Herald in the employment section and see something that might fit me. Or wherever she placed me, I didn't like it. So I found another job, and I started working with the Dallas Police Department. And so I worked there for a while before I went to the federal agency. But in the meantime, I had been introduced to the Dallas Indian United Methodist Church. And as it turns out, the minister here, I had met him many, many years ago. So he knew I played piano. So I became instantly from Baptist to a Methodist. and that was my involvement because being young, and then my husband came a year later from Haskell Institute. And we were friends at that time, but we got to know each other here in Dallas and got married. And so we were both members of and he was also Baptist too, and changed over to Methodist. So we started with the church, and then the church, realizing they had some younger people, had wanted us to step up our leadership. So we got our training there through the various things, doing athletics. My husband Larry was into athletics. And so we started developing athletic programs. I was learning how to be an athlete at that time. Well, I was 21 years old, but I was learning turned out to be a pretty good fast pitch softball player. Hey. Turned out to be a pretty good basketball player. Turned out to be a pretty good tennis player, pretty good soccer player. All my life, I played until I was 55, and I started having an eye problem. I had to quit. But I stayed very athletically involved. But we also brought the community with us through the church, and then we started working at the community level. So that's how I got involved, knowing my community. And then I hit a glass ceiling at my federal agency employment that I was at. We were told, I was the only Indian in this office, and a couple of my friends were Black girls, and we were told, don't apply for this. Y'all don't qualify for this. There's a little white girl that was same grade level as us, but she was ready to play after that. She applied. She got the job. We were told not to apply for it. So that was a glass ceiling for me. So I quit working there immediately, and I had no idea what I was going to do, but I had started going to junior college, and so El Centro downtown, and so I got. Larry said, well, you won't even go to college, go full time, finish and get your degree. So here's my scholarship. We were learning the hard way. You can apply for scholarship and you think a little bit later on. So that's just a quick synopsis to where I got. And then after I got my degree, there's a vacancy at the Dallas Independent School District for the American Indian Education Program. my best friend was applying for the specialist program, and then they wanted me to apply as an assistant to work for her. But then when the interview process started, they realized I also had a college degree, even though it wasn't in education, but I didn't burn any bridges like my friend had.
Mm.
And so they chose me over her, realizing that I really didn't have the experience except just what I did at the community, but that was part of the accomplishments that paid off for me. And so that's how I became the director for after maybe 6-7 months, and they changed me to director of the American Indian Education Program, which I basically run. It was kind of getting Indian kids into school, keep them there, and then get them graduated.
Mm-hmm.
In the meantime, we're working with parents because parents felt like that they didn't have any voice in the school district. They didn't know anybody to work through to broker for them. So I was that person. But because I was pretty well known in the community, it made me easier to work for the Indian students and for the parents through DISD. From there, my visibility throughout the city of Dallas and state became better known because I had a job in a well-known organization for American Indians. And I always felt like this is my ministry for my people to work for American. I could have left there and got better paying job if I wanted to, but I was very, very satisfied with what I was doing. It was for my Indian people because they needed me, I needed them. We all needed to elevate ourselves. So when I first started, there might have been 3-4 of us adults that had graduated here locally and had got a degree. No high school kids or anything. There might have been 1 or 2 maybe that gone on state college, but they weren't really identified with the American Indian community either. Mm-hmm. But by the time that I left, I would say over half of our high school kids that graduated were at least going to junior college. Several of them were going to state universities and to colleges at different levels. So a great accomplishment within 20 years time before I left. But in the meantime, we had different things that happened. So, but DISD was able to promote me because I was one of the races. It was always American Indian, Blacks, African American, whites. Mm-hmm. But I was always included because I was there. Mm-hmm. But even though I was quiet, my presence was always requested, and I always turned up where the American Indian needed to be.
Yeah.
It made a lot of difference. And they even sponsored me to go to Dallas Leaders, which is a prestigious, at that time, 12-month program for whatever it was at that time. But they sponsored me to go to that. So I was very proud of that. In the meantime, one of the things that I'm very proud is when just beginning of school, we had a back to school rally. And at that time, all the schools come out with all their cheerleaders and teachers just before first day of school. And then at that time, our superintendent was a woman. She comes out in a bulldozer. But just before then, and just right maybe before the last school rally, I happened to turn around and this person hadn't been out there for a while, but all the high school cheerleaders were out there. This one was there with a grotesque headdress made from top of his head down, that probably went down to the head of American Indian. Mm-hmm. And my staff and I have been going to school telling them, you don't do this, you don't say this because of the stereotyping. We wanted them to unlearn about stereotyping, mm-hmm. but be aware of what is accepted, not accepted in today's time. And so many of the teachers were doing that because they were going to colleges too at nighttime, and they had diversity classes that they would call us. And so we were able to get that education, the truth out there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes that truth hurt because we had a husband to call us one time, and he was very upset because his wife said we had gone and told her that something about American Indian she was doing in her class should not be there. So my staff had to tell him why that was wrong, and then he understood, so he had to translate it. But sometimes it was hard for the truth for some of these teachers, older teachers, to accept because they needed to relearn.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's basically what I was relearning as we went and teaching them. But going back to the rally day, uh, I was under the bilingual department at that time, so they started looking at me. Said, Peggy, do you see that head over there? I said, yes, I do. And I said, I'll have to address that. But I did go tell the high school student, I said, I'm going to just give you information. I said, tell your principal that I'll be visiting him, expect a call from me because I said, your presence out here is not acceptable for American Indians.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where the mid-manager of DISD should have known better and not have allowed that person to be there. When at that time, the philosophy was all and safe environment for all students at all levels, which supposed to have included, but here again, the invisibility of small numbers and statistically insignificant. Somebody didn't think about American Indians. Whoever, even at those at high school, didn't think about it, so allowed the student to be there. So next day, I did talk to my associate director and told her what I was going to do. I talked to my staff. I said, whatever you decide is going to be up to you, but this is what I'm going to do. And our urban Indians have never had to deal with racism at that level at all. This is a national level, but nobody had educated us down here. We needed education. Luckily, I had, so I knew what to do. I had a small advisory committee that was made of parents that worked with me because that was one of the stipulations that Indian programs have to have parents to work with them. Make sure that the money is coming for Indian students stay with Indian students instead of being coordinated into the DISD fundings, or as it was happening in different school districts. And so I told my parents what I was going to do. They had no idea, but they supported me. And then we talked to the assistant superintendent, who had already told the superintendent what we were going to do. So I didn't even have to talk to the superintendent. He sent his special assistant. He was assigned to work with me on this special project. So they had already said, we're going to have 2 years' time to address all DISD, 10 of them, to remove their logos and their images. We did it quietly. We did it internally. So it can be done. And that just prior to that, just a few years before then, when the mascot issue had just started with an education system, Los Angeles had to go into court because they didn't want to give up the Indian mascots. They eventually lost and had to do it. But Dallas worked with me. They said, we know better. It was just they're waiting for somebody to speak up. So that I told the truth, and we addressed it. And I was able, within 2 years' time, we had it taken care of. So that was one of the major accomplishments, and it still goes on. And we'll talk to you a little bit later on what we're dealing also with a school system that's close by in reference to mascot, but we'll touch on that a little bit. The curriculum, I was assigned to work to the textbook social studies, which comes out every for New Year for new books, and so none of our Indian community had ever been asked to sit on this. I was the first one to sit in because I was a specialist as part of DISD, and so we had probably about 10 books to come out, and of course, first saying, "Where's American Indians?" Or there's maybe one page maybe with a big picture, maybe a couple of paragraphs about American Indians, and that was it. Now, of course, at that time when we had to review the book publishers would come, so I would ask them, who wrote this for y'all? Because sometimes they had like Indian sounding name, like I would say maybe Polly Sings the Bird type of last name. Indians don't go by that name publicly. And so I know this wasn't really Indian, but somebody's trying to use that name so non-Indians will think that they're Indians. And so that was my my introduction to textbook review session. And I just want to throw that in. Then today's time, we're still talking about ethnic studies. We ran into a problem there that Brian will share with you a little bit. But again, our voices were not heard. American Indian voices never heard, because a lot of our Indian people won't stand up and won't voice their opinion because they're afraid. They're the only ones there. Nobody's going to be there to support them. It takes only a few people to stand up and make their voices heard. So that's one of the things that we really have to find. And in the city of Dallas, I still, even to this day, people will come and surprised that there's American Indians living in the area.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of going back to the creation, maybe like in 2011. On Columbus Day, I made a statement, paraphrasing that it's not fair for Indian students have to observe a holiday honoring a person that has invaded the land when we weren't even lost.
Right.
And so I called the next day from a friend from the Southwest Jewish Congress who said, well, Peggy, what are you going to do about it? I said, nothing. I said, I just want to put it out there. And she said, well, let's do something. She said, why don't you introduce the legislation at the upcoming session and get a state law? So, of course, I told her, well, let me pray about it and I'll get back with you tomorrow. So I talked to my husband, Larry, and we always did everything together. So we talked about it. This is a whole lot bigger than we ever thought we would ever be imposed upon us. But we said, okay, we'll try it. And so next day I called my friend Susan Myers and told her we'll do it. And so we started from there. It's kind of like blind leading the blind, especially on my part. It said, so if you need any help, call us. And I said, okay. I had no idea what to do. But we learned as I picked this younger generation to help me make the wordings for this legislation, because I wanted it to be by the Indians, for the Indians. And so it paid off. We even had a pro bono, well-known law firm from Washington, D.C., who wanted to help us, but we did all the work already, and we'd already got it assigned to, at that time, to the state representative, Roberto Alonzano, who's going to introduce it for us. That was already on his docket to do that as soon as they had the open day in October. And so everything was taken care of when the attorney of the law firm, but they did go with us. They had signed somebody from Dallas to go with us when we went to the public hearings. And so we started having good support. I had no idea, where we're going to go with how the people in Austin felt about American Indians, but and at that time it was a Republican governor. I had no idea how he felt, and I'd been already encouraged to be ready. You probably have to do this 2-3 times, but by the time we got through, it went through. We hardly had no dissent at all. And I got a call from a friend, Alabama Kushada, in May. I think it was May 13th, about 3:30. He said, Peggy, have you heard? Your law was passed, it was signed. Nobody told us. And by that time, my husband had passed away, so he didn't get to see it go into the sessions, didn't get to know that it had passed. But Brian had already stepped up, and we were getting ready to, that Monday, to tell our people, we don't know where the law is right now, but be ready in case we need to go down. All of a sudden, we had to change our menu. Since we had asked for the last Friday in September to be designated as American Indian Heritage Day in the state of Texas, to honor the contributions and dedications that the American Indians communities. We wanted communities come first before leaders. So we said American Indian communities and leaders have contributed to the state of Texas, basically paraphrasing that. So that's what was signed immediately. And so that Monday we told our girl, we got to start planning. And so that's how we did. So this coming September 25 is this coming Friday is going to be our 8th annual celebration. Then we're going to have this year we're having a webinar session, going to be 25 and September 26th, because normally we have a community celebration the day afterwards on Saturday at Lone Star Park, but since we can't, we're having 25 and 26 available to everybody. Everybody's open. It's going to be in Zoom from 10 o'clock to 4 o'clock on Friday, then 10 o'clock to 3 on the various topics. And let me share some of the topics that we're going to have. Of course, I'm going to tell them about the creation of the bill. There's a lady that's come from another program that's going to talk about the SEED program, SEED program, meaning that this time back to the natures, the old traditional ways of plants and how it comes into how are the parents teaching their children, since a lot of them can't go to school, how you teach about environments, about plants and your health. And then I'm going to have a storytelling. There's a lady named Aldrina Duma, who's the Texas State Indian storyteller. Hardly nobody knows about her, but she's been doing it for many years and she's a well-known, so she's going to be one of our guests. The Caddo tribe, who gave Texas its statehood, is going to do a segment on the Caddo tribes who are still here in the state of Texas and hardly nobody knows them. And Trinity River, the original name came from the Caddo, the Arkansas, to where eventually it was changed to Trinity River, but they're going to talk a little bit about that. And then we're going to have demonstration, stickball demonstration, which is an old Indian game, kind of forerunner to lacrosse. That's going to be introduced. That'll be on Saturday. We have a lady named Mary Lyons, who's an elder with the Chippewa in Minnesota. She's going to be our special guest. She's got wealth of wisdom and knowledge and has been all over the world. So that's some examples that we're going to be introduced in various programs. And so I think that with the curriculums, with the storytelling, a little bit of that be addressed here. Some of the teachers will be able to get that and be able to help that with their teaching, because usually last part of September and October is when school districts start talking a little bit about Indians. Well, it depends on how long the teacher wants to do it. Preparing for November, which is the presidential proclamation for Native American Heritage Month. So we want to be ahead of that curve and start the process. And that's why we had chose, but the last Friday in September, but that had been already originally used many, many years ago. And it's changed from week to month to where it is today. And hopefully it stays there, because as you noticed last year, the President Trump also wanted to recognize it as American Heritage Day, excluding American Indian. What does that tell you? So hopefully that doesn't happen anymore, because it's supposed to be American Indian or hair. It was until it was changed lately to Native American. And so we'll see where it goes. So I'm going to rest and I'm going to let y'all talk.
Okay. So that was a very good history of everything, and I'm glad you touched on so many things in that. What I wanted to talk about a little bit, because and we talked about this before the show, but there are people that say, wait, well, I've heard that, calling somebody an Indian or an American Indian is not who they are. What about Native? What about Indigenous? So Brian, can one of you address that question? Because I have even had people ask me, as a Black person or an African American, what do you want to be called? And I get that all the time. So I can't imagine what you all have to go through with that. So can you sort of explain that and why you chose to stick with American Indian as your way to identify?
Okay. Well, before everything, and during the titles that were perceived upon us, that we were labeled as savages before that. And savages were more of a European term. So in our direction, we're trying to break the modern master mode. And so you're looking at an incorrect truth template that defines the hardships from generation to generation.
Mm.
And you're looking at how countries, not individuals, conquered this land. And with that, and when conquering and dealing with negotiations with the sovereign nations, you're still seeing that blueprint still practiced today in
Mhm.
Mm.
today's time.
Mhm.
So a lot of people don't know the start of Black Lives Matter that started against the conquest against American Indians. They don't know where, the other part of redlining. They don't know that it came from reservations. It came from land allotments. Even in research, when you talk about Black Wall Street, there's a lot of American Indians that were called freedmen's. They were Creek tribes.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
They even had shops in Black Wall Street. So you have to understand that even though you call us what we were, our American Indian isn't a lot is the DNA inside of a lot of people.
Yes.
So going back to your original question is that it depends on what time period it is. It depends on what generation. It depends on how you feel entitlement of your education makes you proper in today's corporate world.
Mm.
So even in that one, you will hear American Indian, Native American, Indigenous. You'll hear people doing their own tribes, but then you also hear the other ones give their old terminology of what the elders used to tell them while they were in ceremony.
Mm.
So for us, we have to fight against people who have social issues within themselves where they see themselves as 1/32nd blood quantum of an American Indian
Mm.
sovereign nation, and that issue hurts them because either they're state or federal, and they still feel like, well, I'm state, I'm outside of the circle, or I don't get the same benefits as an American Indian or Native American. They don't know that peace treaties were only constituted only because you killed millions and millions of American Indians. It's basically like today's politics. I'm sorry. Well, you're sorry after what? After how many people you've killed? They want to wipe away the guilt and the blood stained shirts.
Mm.
So you're dealing with people who want to be PC of Native American. Well, to me, African Americans are Native American. Polish people, Italians, Jewish, Germans, they're all Native American. If you're born here, you're Native American. So just to go side note is that they said, well, we're gonna have powwow with Native Americans. So when did the Irish get through playing? What are you talking
Mm.
about? Oh, American Indian. No, it's not because it's Native American. I
Mhm.
mean, you invite anybody else like it's International Day
Mm.
because of the description or the right terminology of what Native American is. It's everybody who's been born here. American Indian is all about if you were forced to have a CDIB, almost like you have a number on a Jewish person.
Mhm.
Mm.
If you've been to boarding schools, and that goes with American Indians and also the First Nations up in Canada, they went to boarding schools. You've been sent to an Indian territory or a reservation, which a lot of other people who say they're natives might be from Mexico, and this is not a knock on them. This is just technicality
Yeah.
of the terminology of American Indian, and you know, I think for us being American Indians, we have to really define our identity, which really isn't geared to anybody else. They
Mm.
can say, this is me, this is who I am, this is my DNA. This is what Ancestry.com told me, so I'm going to stick with it. Even though
Mm.
10 minutes later, I'm switching and buying new regalia or, new apparel or more generational identification to who their ancestors were. Might have been a month ago. But when you're born
Mm.
to this, and you have to show just like those numbers for the Jewish, then it becomes a little more deep rooted. So American Indians, the term is from peace treaties. So in history book, if you tell us that do you choose Native American, American Indian, I'm like, y'all are smart educators. Y'all should already know the answer.
Mm.
Y'all teach, um, y'all teach education, and then also you show the history of the United States. Tell them where we're fit in. Why do we got to tell you why we have to educate you on our history? You're the one telling out the next generation.
Mm.
Are we good? Are we bad? Are we invisible? Or do you highlight us in the right respect? And
Mm.
so even when you have to educate, they're not equipped to be educated for American Indians. And that's why you still see something like Thanksgiving that's coming around the corner when you know it's a massacre. They've already documented it's a massacre. And they already shown that even in the hospitality, you still get massacred because of you see them not surviving off Mother Earth or the land, but technically you're dying because you're in a new land and you don't know how to adjust, to what the world's offering you, especially in new lands. And so, those are the parts where people understand and look at us. Why are you offended? Well, I think everybody should know their history before they start pointing fingers. And so that's the why American Indians becomes more relevant, because you're not going to listen to us. You only listen to Google. You only listen to professors who are non-native, or you listen to history teachers giving the wrong information.
Mm-hmm.
And guess what? They stand behind it no matter what, even
Mm-hmm.
if you do provide the truth. It's hearsay from their perspective. And so this is where American Indians is an identity of 567 tribes, nations, bands. What is the other one? You know, uh, Pueblos. And so, how do you not define all that history, cultural preservation, ceremony, the way we treat Mother Earth, how we know where roots of medicine, how we know where our food was distributed or came from, and how we make them? How do you lock that up into two words?
Huh.
Mm.
So that's why we have to say we're Seminole Choctaw,
Mm.
and and that's why my mom was Choctaw, because it's not right or wrong, but it's because it's something we believe in. This is our identity, where other people may say I'm this, but they don't tell you where they really come from. They don't tell you where the root is. And I think that's the hardships of what's going on in today's practice, is that you're looking upon urban settings, or how they look at themselves on different platforms of discussions, because their collective thought for change is now becoming relevant, and you need to own who you are.
Mm.
Because if you're asking us how deep we need to go in our identity, I sure am going to reverse it to you. And,
Mm-hmm.
and I've even asked people, you know, identify who you are. If we're going to have almost like a sovereign, embassy meeting, that's the way. Because I'm a sovereign. I come from a sovereign nation, and technically, I am not people of color, which sounds bad, but I will support. But people of color don't have to show CDIB cards all the time. And even in the upcoming vote, which I also say, yeah, I need to go vote too. Guess what? We'll be showing our tribal membership citizenship cards,
Mm.
because that's U.S. government documentation. They have to approve that. Guess what? People don't know what that is, but that's not my fault. U.S. government needs to teach them that y'all put that on us. This is our identification to proof. So we vote. We'll be voting and showing that as our proof, and letting them, and we vote according to that. So we need to take what people have and placed on us, and then flip it to them. So if they don't
Mm-hmm.
know, their manager should know. If the managers don't know, their regional director should know. Directors don't know. Guess what? They should have put a 110-page document together of why that's accessible, why that's approved, and why that they should actually just let it, they should actually know what it is.
Mhm.
If, and for us in education and everything else with even the Metroplex, that I don't care if it's one American Indian or 500 American Indians, we're going to fight for everybody in each district, county, regional, and statewide issues. And I think that's the part where they need to understand that today's time that this is starting to become an evolution of a movement, because
Hmm.
the things you hear are something what people fought for 30 years ago in civil rights. So there's, so this is our time with a lot of support, but we're still having to fight issues that were 30 years ago. They're almost
Hmm.
in the terminology during segregation. So you're still having
Yeah.
to fight that mentality of, why do y'all want change? Who are y'all to tell me we want change? Prove it. And
Hmm.
then, the last part is that this is our heritage and our tradition versus what. So I think those are the keys of what change is for American Indians, because American Indians is in the peace treaties. Guess what? It's also in the bad part of the Second Amendment that calls us savages, and also, and also in the Declaration of Independence. But we're not mentioned very well in those also, because Second Amendment was only created, even though it was misconstrued in truth, you had free will to kill any American Indian, because it doesn't mean you have to negotiate land. You can just kill us off and then take our land,
Uh,
and that's why you have different. That's why there's so many avenues of why the land rush was so relevant. But how do you think they massacred? Or how do you think they have riots? How do you think police are able to do what they do? How do you think amendments, policies, rules, and regulations are able to move? Guess who were the guinea pigs in this situation, and
Mm.
guess where that blueprint comes from. So
mhm.
That's real talk. There's so much in what you said, and also what you said, Elder Peggy. There's so much history and so much. Well, I mean, we always say not telling the whole narrative, but when you don't tell the whole narrative, let's just call it what it is. It's a lie,
It's a
and
lot.
so it's a lie. And something that you said that sort of stuck out to me, and is that look what the name is in the treaty,
Yeah,
and how you have to stick to what was in the treaty to make sure you get what was in the treaty, because even in that, they're still trying to wiggle out of that.
yeah,
They still are you're still having to have things like Standing Rock, and this sort of thing, even with you trying to stick to the things that were established, including the way you identify. And so if I'm wrong on that, let me know. But I just want to make sure that I want people to understand and be clear on that. The fact that you have to know all of these things, but when you go to, for example, you go to vote,
yeah,
and you have to have a kind of ID that the person sitting there might not have ever seen before because of a lack of education. But you're expected to know everything
mhm,
about the country that you're from.
yeah.
Like, and so and let's get on that for a second, because, and Quo, if you want to
I
if
am.
you
I'm
want to
gonna,
talk
I'm gonna
about
hop
this,
in real quick because,
yeah, go ahead.
and it's expected to know everything, but then to be ignored so that others, so
Mhm.
that experts can come in and correct, or so that experts can confirm, or so that experts can attest to whatever you're saying or not saying. And it's this multi-layer complex system built on lies, built on kind of self-preservation, or built on supremacy, if you will, in a manner of, we won't educate everybody else about this. You need to make sure you're educated about this. But then when you come and tell other people about it, we have our own experts who are going to contradict what you're
Mhm.
saying because they assume that they know best. And we talk about it so often in that you can never be an expert in someone else's culture. You can never be an expert in someone else's experiences. People can speak for themselves. People should speak for themselves. And it is a manner of, or a matter of, whether or not we are bold enough, we are brave enough, we are humble enough to be able to move out of the way so people can tell their own stories. And then to accept the truth, as you said, Elder Peggy, accepting the truth hurts. There are a lot of people, and we all do it in our own way. That once that truth and it hits, it can be painful, but it's a matter of what happens after that. What do we decide to do? What boldness is necessary for us to say, okay, how can we correct this? How can we go about addressing this? And then it's a matter of when people look at you and say, this is wrong, you cannot represent us in this way. This is wrong, we can speak for ourselves. This is wrong. Where's the person? Where's my voice at the table? Where's the argument? Where's the debate? I have yet to fully, where's the debate? What's the issue? I've yet to fully understand that. There should be no debate. There should be no argument, not against truth. The truth is that these things are missing. The truth is that these things are wrong. The truth is that we have yet to actually reconcile, to actually acknowledge, and then to actually come together to work to heal. There is no debate in that. So I want to personally thank both of you just for sharing in that. And I know, Kristian, you wanted to get to what the differences, because there are differences. And Brian, you touched on that as well, as we kind of roll into this Black, Indigenous, people of color kind of grouping. The fact that it is not a matter of being divisive, but it is a matter of ensuring that we're not putting a blanket across everything, because everybody has different experiences. We all have similar experiences, yes, but there are very different experiences that come with each ways in which we identify. And so
I think one more thing on where Chris was talking about technically lying is that how do you accept the truth when you've been hiding the truth?
Yeah.
The other part,
Hey,
the part is that how do you defend the country's origin when ancestral politics is what created the U.S. Constitution?
Yeah.
Hup, hup, hup.
And you know, from there, you're looking at how you were coming from Europe to escape, religion. You were actually kicked out, exiled, like someone like a president's ancestry, or they were paid to be assassins.
Yes.
Or they were under a godly country, because even then, religion is a big key. But when it came over from Europe, there's only 5 religions probably, and I may be off 1 or 2, but count how many religions are today in the United States, and how many mindsets of under doctrine of discovery and manifesticity you had to fight against. And we never fought against one country.
Yeah.
We fought against original World War. So when you do 1, 2, and 3, you need to make sure you add another one in, because there was a battle over here. And guess what it ended up being? It ended up being a bio warfare, because they didn't kill us with their guns. They just killed us by simply sneezing in the air.
Yeah. Blankets.
Blankets, yeah. It's biological warfare. It's that's what it is. It's genocide. That's just that's called what it is. And you know, I say that because we always, you know, we work in the arts, and Brian, you are a visual artist, and we talk about the importance of who's telling the stories, whose stories get told, whether it's through visual arts, through dance, through opera, through musical theater, whatever it is, you know, who gets to tell the stories. And I think this is why I wanted to talk about the importance of narrative, because just having the two of you here today, you know, is going to educate so many people. And one of the things that was also touched on was the invisibility. Elder Peggy talked about that earlier on, where she was talking about, you know, where the American Indian falls in statistics. Elder Peggy, can you elaborate on that? Because we got on that a little bit, but I want to talk about, I don't think people understand how significant that is, because we talked about, you know, how the fact that most people could be standing right next to you and not know your heritage or your background. and
Well,
why that is.
with American Indians, at the early stage of history, of course, if you were dark complexion like I am, were looked down upon, not accepted,
Mm.
and that were Indians. The latter ones had a chance to move up a little bit, maybe move into white world, pass
Mm.
off as white people. But on the other hand, then a lot of our people during period of early 20s and 40s were going through forced adoptions.
Yes.
Our
Mm.
kids were taken away from our Indian parents. The Indian kids were adopted into non-native and those kids didn't know their culture or their heritage. That's one example. But on the other hand, a lot of our kids were taken away from their parents and put into school, taking the Indianness out of the Indians. So when they came back to their families in some situations that's been documented, so well, I don't know who you are.
Mm.
Because this is a white person mentality standing in front of me instead of Indian. And this person is a lost person. What do you do then? And so we've had a lot of that happening under religion.
Mm.
Yeah, under religion. Then forced religion upon us when we already had our spirituality. Many of our people didn't accept it, so we still have a lot of Indian spirituality going on. My people accepted Christianity very quickly, so I was raised going to church, singing gospel songs, and knowing Christianity. But I didn't know anything about my culture or my history as other tribes did. And so I'm a late bloomer into that area. So, we all have different type of experience, but when it comes to visibility, sometimes the United States government have wanted us to assimilate into the white stream.
Mm.
A lot of Indians that have married into white and then their kids married to white where the Indian blood is diminishing. They can easily pass as white and they think as white, so therefore they are white, even though they're Indians. The only time they would claim Indians if they think they can benefit from it,
Huh.
which is bad. So invisibility depends on, I go to a lot of presentations all the time. I need strong allies because we don't have the numbers economically, we don't have numbers influentially, we don't have numbers in leaderships at the national level, regional level, anywhere. And so I need everybody to help me as they listen when I tell them about my truth, my hurt, my pain, what our people have gone through and we're still going through. And that some of these people, especially the younger one, may be in a position later on in their life, in a job or whatever, to make a difference for maybe an Indian family or an Indian. Remember what I said, not necessarily who I am, but remember I need allies, that our Indian people need allies. And so invisibility means that we blend in so much. And here in Texas, most people think we're Hispanics because we're brown. So we already lost our color identity. We have to fight hard for that. And then we have so many that's merging into different ethnicities. So their color tone may be more of that hue. And so that makes it even harder. So invisibility, yeah, very much. And so, yeah, people like myself, we have to have the voice because a lot of our Indian people is not going to stand up and voice their opinion because they're afraid to, they don't want to because they're the only one. And then I've been in an urban town, sometimes you lose all your Indian identities. And so who do you speak for anyway, except your family?
Mm-hmm.
So invisibility means different definition for us and how it could be addressed, but it's hard to address when we don't have organizations in Dallas that could be doing that. We have only really two organizations in Dallas, as big as it is. There should be more for American Indians. No agencies, no little programs, or nothing else going on. So it makes it hard for our comprehensive community to be together. We come together, we have a little our Indian, as we say, smoke signal, using the stereotyping word. But we keep that going. So that's how we keep each other informed of what's happening.
Quo, you have a question? You look like you're stewing.
I'm always doing, because I'm always honored to be able to learn, to be able to listen, to be able to witness, to be able to move, you know. And so in what you shared, Elder Peggy, you spoke about not having enough of a significance statistically because of numbers, and what that looks like in numbers, what that looks like in data, but then what that looks like in experiences, in real experiences, as well as the importance of allies. And when I say ally, as someone who will help, not as, oh, poor you, it's not me, but someone who is in it with you, but then someone who also has the flexibility to move out of the way so that the platform, so that the space is yours. That's what that means. It's not talking for, it's not talking over. I'm not a voice for the voiceless. We've spoken about that before in the show. It is doing the work to ensure that the true narratives are told in the best way possible. And that is often from the primary source, right? That is from those who live it. That is from those who can express it. That is from those who continue. Like, it's not something you can pick up and put down. Oh, I decided to study this. No, this is, I live it. Let me tell you about it. And so as we do this, it lets me know how much how necessary it is for us to do it together. How necessary it is for us to do this together. How necessary it is for us to be honest about the various privileges that we have in our different ways, right? We're speaking about colorism as well and what that means and what it looks like. Because it's very real. What that means is we all assume or want to move away from what we actually are, who we are, what we represent in the different ways that we show up. So thank you. Again, I'm just gonna keep telling you thank you.
Because, it really is, because there's so many layers to what you both are talking about, and there's so many things that are intertwined, and there's so many things that get left out of any talk about race, about identity, about access, about diversity, equity and inclusion, access, justice. There's so many things that gets left out. And the other thing that struck me, Elder Peggy, as you were talking, is the deliberate nature of things, of systems that were put in place. Like, I can talk about it from a Black perspective, but to hear it from another perspective and hear similarities. This is not the first time kids have been taken away from their parents, and forced to assimilate somewhere. Has it? Now, when you marry somebody of another race or another ethnicity, that's your business. That, and that's up to you to teach whatever you want to teach inside of your house. That's a choice. But you kids didn't have, you got your children taken away. See, this is and that's why I said there's nothing new under the sun. And so when people say this is not my America,
define it, right? What does that mean?
We are, all of us on this particular call, right? This show right now can look at each other and be like, well, what America were you living in? Because it's been mine. I know my people have had their children ripped from their arms. Yep. Your people have had their children taken away. Like, so what are you talking about? And so I think that's why when we talk about the entire narrative, the whole truth, there's your truth, every individual truth, and then there's the truth. And it's usually a combination of all of our individual truths, because we all have individual experiences. And so I will go on a tangent, and we've been going long, but this is good. And y'all know me, I will sit and learn and listen, especially when an elder is dropping such wisdom.
Yes.
But I wanted to kind of go back a little bit again, because we're in the arts, and Elder Peggy just told us she's a pianist. We know Brian is a fantastic visual artist. What does it look like, in artistry? What does equity look like in artistry? Particularly for somebody who is an American Indian.
I guess I'll start. I don't believe in the ISMs of art, romanticism, expressionism. You know, I don't dig deep into those narratives, but I do believe in activism.
Mm.
And activism with art is visuals that take a deeper conscious evaluation toward genocide, politicide, democide, and shows the destruction. So in that part, that's where you have to kind of flip it and show the strength of our people, not the negative part or the weakness, because our people never ask for anything. And I think that's the part that has been thrown at us from the Bureau of Indian Affairs that are underneath the US government that actually tells us that welfare is a good thing because you're being oppressed. So in that part, it goes to the narrative of even like opera. What's the first visual sensorial you hear about American Indians? Is it a drum beat? Is it a flute? Is it old songs? No, it's the glamorous ensemble of a full blown orchestra playing their own narratives, which has John Wayne killing American Indians that are playing Indians that's living in southwestern United States. So you just messed us up in our identity under Hollywood.
Mm.
And the Indians you see killing, were they really Indians? Because I saw a lot of white people. So with wigs and and you know,
Headbands, the fake headbands that weren't really a thing.
But
well,
that's either, right?
I was actually going to say black face hidden under a red face terminology
Mm,
because they were darker in their skin to look like American Indians.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the part where now it's offensive, but it wasn't back then. And
Mm-hmm.
so you're talking about art. Art is a representation of our identity. It's the part where you look at what is a costume and what
mm,
is regalia. Guess what? Um, that other example will come up under Halloween.
Yeah.
The other part is that Thanksgiving is the other part of misidentification. The other part where if you're going to be calling it like it is, fall is the season of colonialism. Everything happens of negativity comes about American Indians comes from the deepest seed of prejudice, stereotypes, and racism.
mm.
You know, I'm sure a lot of people are still crying that there's no Washington Redskins now. It's only a Washington football team. And guess what happens now? Now the marketing can't do anything of Cowboys versus Indian because there is no Indians,
Mm.
which shouldn't even be in there in the first place. Because to me, I always think of art. If you're gonna say this is our mascot, this is our representation, guess what? To me, I see it as a trophy of holding a dead head over
Yeah.
your head, raising up.
That's it.
So it's perceived ownership. So in art, which for us is marketing, us as a campaign, when you have to know that a good Indian is a dead Indian,
Mm,
that's a campaign. They'll go from Wild Bill Coyote to all the cartoon books and all that and all the shows that portrays American Indians like that when that was just for show entertainment, not for anything else. The other part with art is that what is the identity of American Indians? Is it something that non-natives go to Target and buy a teepee because they think it's um, under cultural preservation, and they still sell it there? They still sell it at Sam's. So it's a marketing that's corporate, but at the same time as that you're given exposure to a perception of a brand that influences that is now a nationwide approval.
Mm.
mm,
So we're not fighting white privilege, we're fighting everybody because everybody will do the stereotypical ways when I hear about American Indian. A lot of people aren't the educated or respectful. They're taught that media, but like my mom said, there is no media of American Indians. And so that's the strength of what we do is to promote our own identity in visuals, art pieces, cultural narrative, songs, old songs, and then even some of the cultural dances we have. Those are the art forms of truth. And that's our, I tell everybody, I said, this is our world interpreted, not yours.
Mm-hmm.
You need to listen to us and understand that I don't speak for, like we're doing Caddos this year. I don't speak for Caddos because I'm not Caddo. I am
Mm-hmm.
American Indian, but it doesn't mean I'm going wearing a headdress everywhere thinking I'm special, because there's steps how to to be a leader to wear one of those. But that's not even my tribe. So if I'm not going to speak for another American Indian, surely non-native shouldn't even do that either, and don't feel like it, and don't say, well, this is my heritage, this is my tradition. Guess what? That goes into American Indian mascots also of what
Yeah.
we fight for. But I think the whole part of what we do is that we have images to promote tribal awareness within each tribe. We do every year so we can build an apparel of identities to fight all the negative stereotypes, to create our own narrative, but be also seen in the United States and Canada, because people need to reevaluate who we are with inside of us, even if we are American Indian, to know that we need to support each other, but also we need to be aware of our own people, because guess where we get all of our knowledge from? The school system.
Mm-hmm.
Now, y'all know the school system hasn't been telling the truth for a long time.
Speak
No,
on it.
no, and also you got the introduction of TEA for African American Studies, and there's supposed to be another TEA for um, Native American, not American Indians.
Hmm.
But you know, I will stop here and let my mom talk about that, and then I will jump back onto the art. So she needs to talk about that topic.
Let's go.
Several years ago, the state TEA, the Texas Education Agency, allowed ethnic studies to be developed for African Americans, for the Hispanics, for the, at that time they used the word Native American and Indigenous study. And so the Mexican American, I think it took maybe 4 or 5 years, and they went through some difficult times, because this is an opportunity where the Mexican Americans were able to add current information if they wanted to. Some of the things that, as each of us would think for our ethnicity needs to be included, they were able to do that. And so the word, when I first started hearing, I heard the word curriculum. Curriculum to me, not to be as a writer, I think about textbook. So when we first finally started working on it, well, it turns out it's strand, curriculum strand, basically a guideline that's going to be given to the social studies teachers in reference especially to the American Indians, that these are some other things that has been brought up to our attention that you might consider teaching. And it stops there.
Mm.
It doesn't really give the information. It's going to be up to the teacher to get the information. So whether she wants to or not, he or she wants to teach that teacher, it's going to be up to that teacher. And so the Mexican Americans had to go through their process as a community come together and making sure this is what they wanted in this ethnic studies. And then it goes through a school board who approves it, and then any school board in the state of Texas could do this and with their community and develop a strand. And then if it's acceptable to that particular school district, then it's approved and it goes on to TEA, who will have public hearing. And so with the Mexican Americans, they had different definitions of some names that should have been in there, but finally they all worked it out and got it taken care of. The next one was the African Americans. So it was just this January through this right up to right now. Finally, it went through the public hearing, and there's been given approval, and I understand still there's still some items that the community feels like that has been left out in reference to the African American that needs to be included in here for the contemporary students to be aware of. And that's basically what we're doing, trying to add information that the old textbooks never wanted to carry, never could carry. Mm. And so it's gone through the two, but here in Texas, we had a little problem because when I went to a meeting, I was the only American Indian retired there. I'm not a college professor, I'm not a curriculum writer or anything. I was just in charge of a little program for American Indian students, but nobody was there representing the American except me, American Indian. And so my first question was, is it mandated to be Native American and Indigenous studies? Well, nobody knew for sure. They were going to find out. They said, we don't think so. And that, that could be changed. As of today, it has not been changed yet. Makes you wonder why. And basically the people that are working on the committee for a while they're more of the indigenous people studies, Mexican professors. And, but this is what we're getting to. Again, Indians are not at the college, especially in the state of Texas, at the college level, identifying as American Indian. If they do, they might have 1 or 2 drops in there. But because they identify as American Indians, but not culturally entwined to the community or to the heritage enough to make a difference. And so we got to where we got tired of our little working committee, and I got into a disagreement with a person that was card-carrying Indian. He was talking about some things that I didn't agree that was important for American Indian ethnic studies to include. We got into a very strong discussion, and I don't do that. It bothered me for a while, and a couple of days later, we pulled out. Brian and I and the organization pulled out because we didn't believe in it. But how many Indians would make a stand? And this is not right. When we're telling you we're American Indians, we should be named American Indians. That's never been addressed. And then here we have another supposed to be an Indian trying to address my decision. It wasn't a decision, it was a discussion really. But he wasn't going the right way. But never has apologized when he earlier has said, we need to value the elders. We need to value that. Then when he was talking to me, he did practice what he preaches. And so that's just one example of we've had to deal with ethnic studies for American Indians. So I don't know what they're going to do now, whether it's going forward, but this is one time that Brian and I, being the full-blood Indians, that we stood up, our voice is not heard, we'll pull out. And so that was my example there. Okay, back to you.
I think there's something to that. When something is not sitting right with you, and it's not sitting right with what you're trying to do, you have to stand up. And on this show all the time, I say, be bold, be brave. And if something is not sitting right with what your mission is, gotta go. I mean, that's all there is to it. So I think there's a lesson to be learned.
I would also say that those who are creating those environments, don't say you want something if you don't really want it. Yep. Don't say you want to hear someone's voice, you want someone's opinion, you want someone to lead something. Don't say that if you're not willing to move aside to be shaped by that, because that's what that means. Nobody is joining so that they can give you little advice, little hints about things. No. If you are truly creating an environment that needs to be shaped by someone else, then you allow the shaping. And then, yes, there's collaboration. Yes, you work together. But if something as serious or something as crucial or something as important as anything that is expressed by the community, anything that's expressed by the partner, anything expressed by the audience, if that matters, then you truly allow it to shape what you're doing. You don't fight it. You don't assume that you're the expert of it or over it. You do what is necessary. There's humility that is necessary in that. Otherwise, why did you ask? Like, why did you try? You weren't serious. Be serious about it.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely correct. And I guess we talked about a lot today. We talked about a lot, and we could probably talk 2, 3 more hours because there's just so much in this. But I know we need to wrap. So I want to make sure that we under that we understand that people understand um, just the significance of what you all had to go through, and the fact that you're now in your 8th year of making sure that this well that you have gotten well. And I don't want to say acknowledgement, because the thing is that you've been here. So to
Yeah.
say to somebody, well, we acknowledge you, you know what I mean? Like that's almost condescending, you know what I mean? But the bottom line is that you had to fight long and hard. And Elder Peggy, I'll go back to you talking about even making sure that it's instilled into the curriculum. The fact that you just talked about the fact that you walked away from a situation where that didn't sit right with you because it was not telling the whole truth.
Right.
So I guess unless you have a final question, is there any?
Do.
Okay, go.
I have a final question, because we've spoken about the ways in which we, in our different ways, have to kind of fight to make sure that we are here, we are seen, we are heard, and that we have the autonomy, we have the control over what we're doing. Can you both, or either of you, speak to kind of some of the victories that have happened? Can you speak to the power? Can you speak to the community in the ways in which you see the positive things that are starting to come out of your work, or that have come out of your work over the last couple of decades, and even now, what you see going ahead?
I'll go first. I think the most proudest thing I have is that for a while there is no future American Indian leaders behind me, because there are just maybe 3 of us Indian leaders. The other 2 weren't very interested in developing communities. I can't do it all by myself, and there wasn't anything behind us. And finally, when we started the American Indian Heritage Day, another generation such as Brian, the chairperson, his group of people started coming in. He was able to revive and inspire the other generations. So where today I've already told Brian, I've turned everything over to him. And so he's running it, and he gets all the blames and all the praises. But to me, that's my greatest power, because I was able to turn over in the mantle and be able to see it continuing, but also see a lot of little fire all behind Brian that wants to do it. Mm-hmm. And so that makes a hope here in the state and city of Dallas, really. But our little connections is really spreading out because of Facebook. But so we're so much better than when I first came to Dallas. Okay, go ahead, Brian.
I think I'll touch one more on you talk about art. Our significance of AIC and I Care is that we're able to start a movement, continue a movement, and conquer old practices. When we do art, art isn't pretty to us. It's like you go to a gallery, that's pretty, I like that. I'm not after that, as far as being, I call it a brand consultant and a design ethics or ethicist. That when you look at my piece, it's for cultural preservation. We're eliminating fictional practice, but at the same time, we're trying to look for a paradigm of intellectual honesty. And those are in visuals. And then, the other part is that, you're trying to change a dual citizenship, which is negative and positive. One narrative for us is we represent y'all. We're honoring y'all. And the other part is that it's still racist. Guess what? That's why your monument got knocked down. The other part is that's why we're taking down old narratives that has been in place. And I tell them, they ask me, why you do it now? I've let you had all those years to enjoy a racist icon. Now we're coming at you.
Yeah.
We have strength. And the other part is that with us, now we're questioning who is representing who and for whom.
Mm.
And even in that part, that this is this is civil rights um, visual implementation that we're doing it. It's beautiful when you see non-natives wear my shirts, my designs, my influence. It's nice that our mission statement was only originally supposed to be cultural preservation and education. Now it's like this now, and I don't got enough hands, but they keep going like this, because you're not supposed to say no. You're supposed to protect our community. Our community's bigger than just zip code. And I think those are the narratives of
I
what
see
you're
it.
trying to do, because I hate to say it, we're creating to debate and even controversy for authenticity,
Mm-hmm.
because basically what we're trying to conquer is all injustices.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
It may be not even be invited to the table. It may be not even thought of a city budget. It may be overlooked in our we call it namesakes. Everything you've seen with Black Lives Matter happened on cities that have American Indian terminology and namesakes.
Mm-hmm.
And I always say Mother Earth is watching.
Hmm.
And that's the hardest part to know. But at the same time is that you're trying to intensify the rights of old and new movements. You're trying to um, feel the oppressive pressure to rank politics above aesthetics as an historical imperative. But it's our voice that needs to be heard when we're talking about American Indians. But at the same time, what if you don't know the history? Guess what? It's still going to come down to us,
Mm-hmm.
and it's something we don't want to own, but it's something that experience has showed.
Hmm.
So every narrative of negativity, we got a story in it. It comes down, it comes back to us, and so that's the part um, with our two groups is that we're trying to strengthen the legacy stories in the visualization, but also we're trying to uncover the systematic chronological oversight,
Mm-hmm.
because
Hmm.
when you look at history everywhere, they may say Boy Scouts, American Indians, national parks may be American Indians. Our namesake in other contexts may be overlooked
Mm-hmm.
because there's no American Indians that they've never asked. They're the privileged saying, they'll be okay. We'll just name this.
Yeah.
But when we walk in there, guess what?
Yeah.
It changes. But that's the part where we feel that AIC and iCare has to carry that torch. But at the same time, we got to carry some other things too. But we're a different society from what was back then. But we still carry the social movement for change, but we're still going to be civil rights no matter what. And even, my mom says she's retired. No, because I tell her, you got to go every day. If not, you go stir crazy because you don't fight. But that's the engagement. But at the end of the day, that, you know, this is a civil rights movement, and we're going to be a defense mechanism because so many untruths, so many historical ties, so many art forms, and even so many, you know, history of art, sculpture, music, ceremonial songs. They've been stricken from the history books.
Mm-hmm.
And when you know the truth, we're fighting against everything marketing from advertising firms, social, history, politics, senators, state reps. We're fighting the old ways.
Mm-hmm.
And, to leave it in my last mine one is that I'm fighting for Texas also because it was named under, the name was derived from a cattle tribe. A lot of people don't even know the simplicity of that. And even the namesake we're going after is changed the Trinity River to Arkakosa. That's who we were back then. So those are the ones who are after the original sensorial part of voice, and even the, like you said, Mother Earth. All the animals need to hear those old songs being sung with the old drums and the old dialects being pushed out there. They know that generational from generation, from us to their changes in life. So we're speaking to their grandmothers and grandparents because we've learned our history from our grandmothers and grandparents. So Mother Earth knows where that DNA comes from. So they need to hear everything of the old sounds. And like I said, it's a sensorial movement because people don't want to hear it, that's not my job. My job is for civil rights to make a change.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool. I love it. It has been an absolute pleasure having you both. I've personally learned a lot, and I want to continue to talk with you both, just because we're living in a time right now where truth seems to be a rare commodity, and that's truly unfortunate. But I think one of the things that gives me, it keeps me going, is to see people that will continuously dig for it and strive for it, and will stand up and say something when something is wrong. And so that's just my personal my personal thoughts to you, and thanking you for what you're doing. And to see it happening generationally for me is also very inspirational. So Elder Peggy, the fact that that you instilled something into your son, and here he is here talking, like we say, talking good, is a huge thing. And I have mad respect for that. So kudos to you both. Quo, it's positive notes time.
Positive notes. So there are always so many.
Yeah.
Positive notes. And listen, there is an aspect of deep listening, to listen beyond the statement, to listen to what someone is truly saying, to listen to who someone truly is. So we want to be mindful about deep listening, and then we want to be mindful about what it means to take what we learn with humility and then to move forward together. We always say it, you don't have to do it alone. There is truth that is missing. So we have to seek that with a vengeance, and we have to seek that with power. We have to seek that with determination. And then once we are able to come together in truth, to come together to acknowledge the things that have happened, the things that are happening, we can better shape the things that will happen, the things that are coming. We can shape that, and we should do it together. So positive notes, use your voice. It matters. Use your space, use your platforms, not just for yourself, but for others. Use it for community. It's contagious once it happens. There are so many stories, so many experiences, so many wonderful things about others that we miss out on when we allow the things that want to separate us to truly continue to separate us. So we have to stop it. So my positive notes are: go forth in knowing who you are truly. Go forth in knowing that it's a journey that we all have to take in order to find that out, and that it is a journey we do not have to do alone. So those are my positive notes. And celebrate American Indian Heritage Day in Texas. It'll be this coming week. It is Friday and Saturday, the 25th and the 26th.
Yes, please, by all means. And we will make sure that your website, your Facebook handles, all that, so that people in the description, so that people can go check that out and know where to sign up and log on for those events. Also, folks, be brave, be bold, stand up, even if you're the only one in the room. We heard Elder Peggy talk about that today. Sometimes you have to stand up, and sometimes you have to walk away when something does not suit you. So please, by all means, talk to us in the comments. If you have any questions, please reach out to us. And once again, thank you all for joining us for another episode of Taking the Stage with Kristian and Quo. Thank you to Elder Peggy, and thank you to Brian for being here today.
Yeah.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.